In recent days, the EU and UK have been taking the wrong kind of jabs at each other over frustrations around vaccine supply. But there is, of course, a bigger picture. Only when the global population is being protected from COVID will many of us feel life returning to normal. But there's a catch. Should governments effectively go over the heads of the limited number of vaccine manufacturers in order to increase supply?
The global capacity for producing vaccines is around 3.5 billion, while 10 billion is needed. Additionally, these vaccines that are produced in wealthy countries and are in general kept by those wealthy countries. And developing nations are saying we need to have a share of the pie, not only the share of the vaccines, but also the share of the right to produce these vaccines.
To make a vaccine, you not only need to have the right to produce the actual substance they're composed of, which is protected by patents, you also need to have the knowledge about how to make them, because the technology can be complex. The World Health Organization does not have the authority to sidestep patents, but it's trying to bring countries together to find a way to bolster vaccine supplies. Newsnight has been leaked a draft of WHO discussions about how to improve global vaccine supply and enable poorer countries to make them. The document reveals just how polarised the debate is. Developing countries, most of which have not been given a single vaccine, want the ability to make them. But some richer countries with access to the vaccines are blocking efforts to do this. The discussions aren't just about COVID, but the pandemic has made them all the more relevant.
What growing calls are being made for is to increase the number of companies and laboratories around the world with the ability to produce vaccines, including in developing world countries. And so this text is about trying to facilitate that. So the UK is actually largely playing, I would argue, a negative role. So where we could have language in there that would make it easier for countries to produce more vaccines and more medicines within their country, where it would include initiatives that would finance and facilitate that to happen, the UK is on the opposite side of the argument, trying to remove those kinds of progressive proposals from the text.
But while campaigners say we should enable more suppliers in different countries to make COVID vaccines, drug company representatives have deep concerns. Earlier this month, they wrote to President Biden to share their worries.
Eliminating those protections would undermine the global response to the pandemic, including ongoing effort to tackle new variants, create confusion that could potentially undermine public confidence in vaccine safety, and create a barrier to information sharing. Most importantly, eliminating protections would not speed up production.
But campaigners say it goes both ways. They argue that around £90 billion of public money has gone into developing COVID treatments and vaccines, and the public should have a stake. And once the pandemic ends, there's a lot of money to be made. This was Pfizer executives last week.
What I believe is as we move from a pandemic state, from a pandemic situation to an endemic situation, normal market forces, normal market conditions will start to kick in. And factors like efficacy, booster ability, clinical utility will, basically become very important. And we view that as, quite frankly, a significant opportunity.
It's obvious that their longer term plan is to increase the price of these vaccines once the most urgent phase of the pandemic is over. So that is another reason why developing countries are saying we need to gain the ability to produce these vaccines ourselves now. There's another aspect, of course, that is if you increase the knowledge of vaccine production in other parts or in all parts of the world, you also help to be much better prepared for the next pandemic.
If and when governments should intervene to ensure affordable supplies of medicines is a long-standing issue, but it may be a global pandemic that focuses minds on whether Big Pharma has the world exactly where it wants it.
Deborah Cohen reporting there. Well, a government spokesman said a global pandemic requires a global solution, and the UK is leading from the front, driving forward efforts to ensure equitable access around the world to COVID vaccines and treatments. As one of the largest donors to COVAX, our funding is going to help to distribute 1 billion doses of coronavirus vaccines to developing countries this year alone. Now, joining me now is Thomas Quaney, Director General of the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations, Mogha Kamal-Yani of the People's Vaccine Alliance, and Senior Lecturer at University College Cork, Anne Moore. So let's start with you, Thomas Quaney. On this vital issue, why not let developing countries help with the effort of just making as much vaccine as possible?
Look, we are fully aligned with no one is safe until everyone is safe. But you have to bear in mind where we are. Nobody would have believed 1 year ago that within a year of the pandemic started, we wouldn't have 1, but 4 vaccines approved by WHO. Within 326 days, record time, we had the first highly safe and highly effective vaccine approved and used. And it's also not true, as was implied, that people in developing countries are left stranded and people, even young and healthy and rich countries, get the vaccine. I'm in Switzerland. I was told just today that we will have to wait for spring for another month in lockdown because there's fear about the third wave of COVID-19. And we have seen just 3 weeks ago the first significant amounts of COVAX deliveries reaching people in Accra, Kigali, Nairobi, at the same time as the first vaccines reached Tokyo. We have never seen that in the past. Therefore, we do have this solidarity effort. And
we hear a lot of words, but what we have shown is in the discussions at the World Health Organization, literally, developing countries that have the capacity want the patents, the intellectual property to be waived, and they want to be able to make it themselves because they can't get hold of it. Why are you against that? Or do you not back what the governments are doing essentially on your behalf?
No, look at the reality. Pre-COVID-19 vaccine capacity in the world, as was said, was 3.5 billion for all vaccines. Measles, Hep A, Hep B, influenza, whatever. This year we talk about trebling that vaccine capacity to 10 billion. And when you look at where will these 10 billion come from, about half of them will come from developing countries, most of them from Indian vaccines manufacture based on technology transfer, based on voluntary license, as you have, for example, between AstraZeneca and Oxford and Serum Institute of India. Yes. Just last Friday, the US, the Quad, announced that they will fund a joint venture for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine to be manufactured by Biological, a large Indian vaccine manufacturer. And you have similar collaborations around the world. Half of these vaccines will come from developing countries.
Let me put some of that to Mogha. Collaboration is happening. AstraZeneca's intellectual property has been transferred to India. Hundreds of millions of vaccines are being made.
These are made as bilateral deals where the company, the pharmaceutical company, AstraZeneca in this occasion, are in total control of the contract. We don't know what's in the contract. At the beginning, when they announced it, the talk was about that it would be for developing countries, that the dose will be $3. What's happening is the company sold the vaccine for $5.25 per dose for Brazil, in Brazil and South Africa, $7 in Uganda. So and also this production in Serum Institute, which is meant to be for developing countries, now other countries, rich countries, including the UK. I'm amazed that we're saying we will face shortages here because there's delay in 5 million doses from Serum.
Okay, so there are some specific issues that you point to there, but in general, it is quite something that this new much-needed vaccine has been transferred, the blueprints just handed over to India. I mean, are you saying that other countries, other companies need to do the same thing? Is that your argument? What's going on in this argument in WHO?
My argument is not bilateral exclusive licenses that the companies has total control, and that is like plaster on a huge wound, on an abscess really. So what you need is fundamental solution, and this is not transfer of technology. We're talking about sharing technology, so these companies can produce sustainably this year and next year for COVID and also for other emerging diseases. And WHO has a mechanism to facilitate this transfer of technology, but companies don't want to join it.
Let me put that back to Thomas. So even if some of the intellectual property of the science of these vaccines is shared, as we've seen on some occasions, the technology for making it isn't being shared. Don't you want all hands at the pump here, as much of this being made as possible?
Not quite. You know, the debate which you talked about, the debate about the patent waiver, or taking away the patents, wouldn't give you a single dose more right now.
Really? There's not a single factory? Are you sure about that? Why are they arguing at the WHO about this then?
I'm sorry. What you need to share is, in order to get the vaccine done, you need to know how the skill set, the raw materials, the ingredients. You know, you could get a recipe for cake from Mary Baker, and it wouldn't mean that you would know how to do that cake. 2 weeks ago, we co-organized a big conference of major suppliers from developing and industrialized countries on the current bottlenecks about this daunting challenge of trebling global vaccine capacity. The debate was about shortage of glass vials. Debate was about shortage of syringes.
You can help them. You can help them. They'll make more. Isn't that the answer?
You can't just push the button and you have billions of doses, more of billions of glass.
You're not helping by blocking this patent. What are you scared of here? What's the problem? You've been funded tens of billions from governments in order to get these vaccines going. This is a public good. It's much needed both for health and for the economy.
I fully agree. We are not safe until everyone is safe. And that's why we joined forces, by the way, with the developing country vaccine manufacturers early on with COVAX. We have seen an unprecedented act of solidarity. COVAX aims to roll out more than 2 billion doses to people in developing countries, fully funded by countries such as the UK and others.
Let me bring Anne in now. I mean, what is the danger if these vaccinations... if there's a shortfall in developing countries, what is the danger?
Well, I guess if there's a shortfall in vaccinations of millions of people in low middle income countries, then we are at risk of this virus continuing to spread. And as Thomas correctly said, no one is safe until we're all safe together as a global community. However, I don't think that discussing waiving IP rights, intellectual property rights, will contribute to making vaccines faster. It's not about who owns the rights, it's about the technology transfer that is happening and the agreements that are being made, and the organizations that have put funding into developing these vaccines, such as CEPI, such as government organizations, are insisting on companies transferring this technology and ensuring that the vaccines are being available to low middle income countries. The IP rights, I mean, as a person who's worked in the vaccine field all my professional career, you know, over time we see fewer and fewer organizations, commercial companies being interested in being in the vaccine field because there's so little return on it.
But are we not in the middle of a pandemic? You know, we had the same issue with HIV, and the South Africans and the Brazilians, they manufactured antiretrovirals to great success. Why is this any different?
It is no different. And a lot of companies throughout the world are beginning to scale up and produce vaccines for their own populations and also for other populations. So, I mean, but that is separate to waiving IP rights. IP rights is key for companies and for academics and for innovators to be able to provide something that has a tangible, it is a tangible asset.
Well, let me put that to Moga. Are you saying that there are developing countries ready to go to add additional vaccine capacity who are being stopped by this IP waiver issue?
They stopped by two things. One, the lack of sharing of technology, and the second one, by the intellectual property. And don't tell me intellectual property. It's a mess to say intellectual property is not important. Why is it Moderna has 12 patents on their mRNA vaccine? And intellectual property is not just patent; they're trade secrets. You can't produce a vaccine when you can't use the data, the know-how because of the intellectual property rights. And just in terms of capacity in developing countries, let's not forget, a few months ago, there wasn't one single company that produced mRNA. This is a new technology, and it wasn't produced before. Yet there are many companies that are producing. Why not in the South? There are companies in the South that are able, but nobody is giving them a chance.
So the bottom line here, Thomas Quaney, is it not, and we heard it from Pfizer there, is the bottom line that whatever happens in this pandemic crisis period, we have a situation after that when this is going to be a massive cash cow for the pharmaceutical industry?
Don't know yet. And what I see now is that basically every company knows that it has to behave socially responsible. And what we have seen is unprecedented amount of collaboration within big pharma. You have also seen companies whose vaccine projects failed who now joined the fore. You have seen tech transfer and volunteer licenses with developing country vaccine manufacture. Therefore, following the pandemic, you will have a much bigger capacity also in the South. And we already have to prepare for the next pandemic. That's why, as Anne said, it's so important that we do not send a signal which would be disastrous for future pandemic preparedness.
Thank you, Thomas and Mogha, for that. Thank you very much.